Hey everyone, and thank you for joining us today for Cyber GRC Gone Wrong, Top 10 Real-World Examples we can learn from. I'm Mike Andrews, the founder of Yastis. We're cybersecurity consultants, along with Cyber GRC expert Karina Klever of Klever Compliance. How's it going, Karina?
Good. How are you, Mike? So happy to be here.
Doing really well. Thank you. So just tell you a little about me and my company. Started Yastis about 5 years ago. We're based in Las Vegas. We work with small and medium-sized businesses throughout the U.S. Just help them work on their risk reduction as well as their compliance efforts. Karina, you want to tell everyone about yourself? And
Thanks, Mike. So I'm Karina Klever. I've been in IT since April 1989. Most people tell me to not say that because I age myself, but I've worked on AS400s and done project management and been in the GRC space for over 20 years. And think there's a lot to be said for this whole competency area being unnecessarily overly complicated. So I'm going to personally take this kind of session to bring us back down to some of the basics of some of our core governance controls that we should really be honing in on instead of those multi-thousand row checklists. We work with all kinds of different industries, many different size companies across different regulations and frameworks. So very, very happy to be here, Mike.
Thanks, Karina. So today we're just going to cover 10 different scenarios from the real world, some of which you've probably heard about if you've been in the space for a while, or maybe just heard it in the news. And we want to just tie it back to a lot of the fundamental lessons in Cyber GRC and hopefully make it informative for you and interesting. And I think it's about time to get into the first example. So let me add a document here for the first one. So the first one that I'm going to cover is SolarWinds. If you remember, in 2020, they had a really major cyber incident that affected anywhere between 18 and 30,000 organizations, depending on which publication you read. It was reported that the primary intent of the attack was to target U.S. government organizations, but along with that, thousands of companies were impacted, including large ones like Microsoft, and much smaller companies, and it caused a lot of damage. The amount of records involved wasn't exactly reported, probably because it's too hard to count, but it's got to be upwards of billions of records just based on the scale of it. And this type of attack it's incredibly bad, right? Because if you think about it, if a threat actor wants to target 20,000 companies, do you think they want to go to each of them individually, or should they just look to see who already has access to all those companies, then target them since they already have the keys to all those companies? And if you're familiar with SolarWinds, they have IT and system management and monitoring tools, which those tools generally need high-level privileges like root-level access into your systems. So if those sorts of tools get compromised, it's really, really bad, right? So what happened in this case was a threat actor found that their one of the users had a VPN credential that was just a weak password, right? And there was no two-factor authentication used, which is kind of surprising since this company is heavily involved in the security world and a publicly traded company with a lot of compliance requirements of their own. So the threat actors were able to use that password, get into their systems, really kind of stay dormant for a number of months, something like 4 to 5 months before they even really started using that access to hurt the company. And then what they did was they installed malware, a backdoor, into a software update that was going to be pushed out. And then when the malware, the software was pushed out, the malware sprung to life, and the threat actors had tons of access because they used the backdoor to get into everyone who installed the software. So this also goes to show a change management issue, right? Because SolarWinds probably should have done more testing. It's hard to know how much testing they did, but that is the root cause. Obviously, they didn't find what was going on. And then it's always good when you have a rollback plan, right? So when something's deployed and you realize something's going wrong, you have a way to roll it back. They didn't do that. So as a result of all this, SolarWinds incurred around $25 million in remediation costs, legal fees, and also had to do a number of security upgrades, things like that. They even got lawsuits and got in trouble with the Security and Exchange Commission because they are a publicly traded company, because they failed to disclose the breach promptly. So the way they actually found this breach was cybersecurity company FireEye noticed that it was doing crazy stuff on their own systems. They contacted SolarWinds, who got Microsoft involved, and then together they went to GoDaddy, got them to take over the domain that was involved in distributing the malware, and that's how they kind of put an end to the madness. So, what do you think of that, Karina?
So I also am very, very interested in this one because this has a very heavy vendor management involvement, right? So vendor management controls. One of our biggest risks in our industry. We are not assessing our vendors well enough. We're not, enacting the rights to audit. We are not carefully assessing those contracts. We are not demanding breach notifications occur timely. This was, some articles that I've read on this one say literally supply chain attack to insert malicious code into the Orion system. So basically, it wasn't that SolarWinds, the company, didn't have the right controls, because they probably did, right? They are, like you said, regulated and have a very heavy audit presence and have a lot of controls. But really, this was a vendor that came in and inserted that code. These are APIs, right? So when was the last time you sat down and did an inventory of your APIs? Look to see what kind of data you're passing your API through your APIs to which company, who's on the receiving end, map to your data classification and your data mapping. So this is really important to kind of acknowledge when you're working with the vendors. What kind of guarantees are they giving you for the data how they're interacting with you, and then what downstream vendors are they using in as far as their subservice organizations? You receive a SOC 2 from your vendor. Read the very top. It says subservice organizations are not included in this assessment. And set up compensating controls for that. Ask in the questionnaire. You should have several questionnaires. You should have the smaller questionnaire for the vendors that do not have a whole bunch of involvement with your data or risk to your business. Then you should have the higher end questionnaires. You should also have a tier of vendor for the ones that you're never going to get a questionnaire answered from. So there's different categorizations, but really wrap your hands around how that auditor is going to be involved, how that vendor is going to be involved in your daily operations.
Yeah, I completely agree. That stuff like that can go a long way in stopping an incident like this one. So I'll hand it over to you to hear your informative and interesting next one.
Okay, so the one that I want to present, let me share my screen here real quick. And this came up because I'm going to be a grandma in May. And of course, we are now all about finding cute things for the baby.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. As part of that, I kind of came across this website. It's a maternity and a baby brand that had very high volume and was pushed on Amazon. And I've highlighted here unauthorized access controls. I'm going to say it again. So many of these hacks and violations come down to access controls. What are access controls? Physical, logical, system to system. Those are your APIs, right? You're talking perimeter security controls. You're talking about how are you monitoring your end users accessing? Are they allowed into very specific areas of your infrastructure and data storage based on their role? Not replicated data from one end user to the other, but based on role-based access, RBAC. That's why it's called that. So this is a company who had some great products that I came across. And then it turns out that because they hadn't properly controlled their access, they had somebody come in and do quite a withdrawal, and they had a daily sales of almost $250,000. Good for them. But now they're basically saying their 78 million on Amazon is completely at risk. They're unable to process order, and
Wow.
Folks, now it says they're considering a total shutdown of their business. This is very, very important to really, really let sink in. You didn't do access controls. You got hit with a hacker because you didn't focus on access control. Is a very, very, very basic governance process. And now you got hacked. You lost all this money. You can't process orders. You're shutting your business down. So this is just dangerous for any small business. This is not a very well-known company, I guess. This is not like a big, flashy name. But for those of you who are in small businesses, for those of you smaller businesses, for those of you who may have a startup, there may be a chance that you might not get past a hack. If you can't process orders, and if you don't control access very carefully by doing your data classification and your access control policy very carefully and doing role-based access, you might not recover. And so that's a bit of a shame. What are your thoughts on this one, Mike?
Wow, that's surprising to me because we have two young kids, 2 and 4 months. So I spent a good amount of time and money on the baby sites. And using what I know about breaches and stuff, if you said to me, how much damage do you think would be caused to a baby brand that primarily sells on Amazon? I would say probably not that much compared to a lot of other companies, right? Businesses like that might be able to be ran by, 3 employees and that along with some outsourced help with a pretty simple setup. So to hear that they have that many millions of dollars in revenue, but they might have to shut down as a result of this, really, really surprising. But definitely should have been a plan in place to handle a cyber incident because one, it'd be important for them to realize that a cyber attack would have a bigger impact on them than most might think, and then put a plan in place, right? Like, how can you get the systems back online quick? How can you get access to your data? And then probably working with a cybersecurity consultant for a few hours a month could help them oversee something like this. So I'd be curious to know who was helping them with this regard. Was it one IT person, a small company? Who knows? Be interested in looking up more about this later. I know we only have a few minutes each, but
yeah. So the one thing I want to add to this is I've been hearing a lot of owners of companies or decision makers of companies flippantly say, "I've got cyber insurance."
Yes.
Please be really, really careful with that assumption that cyber insurance is going to cover everything. Cool. So what's the chain of command? The insurer sends a questionnaire to the company. The decision maker company takes that questionnaire, sends it to the IT guy, and the instructions are make sure this all says yes.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, yep. I've seen it a lot. Learned a lot about this. I used to actually reach out to cyber insurance companies, said, hey, like, you want to work together and I can help your clients figure out if they have cyber risk. And they hated me. They wanted me to go away quickly. And I was like, why does this keep happening? And one of them even told me it works better when the client returns the questionnaire saying all yes, so that way they can get the business. Then when something happens, they say, okay, well, now prove your answers. And they can't, and they don't have to pay the claim. And not good. You got to get
85% of the stories that I hear are denied. Claims are denied. So don't think that just because you get a cyber insurance policy, they're going to go ahead and make you whole if you have a situation like this and you're breached. All right, next one. Sorry, Mike, go ahead.
Oh, that was a good one. Surprising, that much damage. All right, I'm going to share another article. Maybe you've heard of this company. Where is it? Okay, here, Uber. Has anyone heard of a company called Uber? I'm actually going to have to probably going to use them today. So, what I'm going to say is just my opinion, and I do not have any ties to the company. So please don't cancel my ride if you don't like anything I say. It's just LinkedIn webinar here. No, but this goes back to the year 2016. This is not related to their 2022 cyber event, which is another pretty well-known one they have. But I highlighted this event because I thought it was pretty unique in how they handled it. So what happened is, it turned out the threat actor was a 20-year-old, roughly kid at the time from Florida, and he got into their GitHub, their code repository, and he was searching through it, found a plain text password for their Amazon Web Services account where their applications and their databases were hosted. Then he went over to there and he got access to pretty much all their data, which was the driving records of about 600,000 Uber drivers, as well as the user records of 57 million users, probably me and everyone I know, maybe some of you. And then he contacted the company, and they agreed to pay him $100,000 for him not to do anything with that data. But where it gets kind of dicey was they classified it as a bug bounty payment rather than a cyber breach, right? So really dicey. I mean, some stuff like that could potentially happen, but realistically, it was not a bug bounty. This was a malicious event. The data was compromised of 57 million users, and then it reported, right? So around that time, about a year later, actually, they got a new CEO. He was the former CEO of Priceline, I believe it was. Really respected company. This guy was really sharp and successful. He heard about the breach. He did not like the way they handled it. So he got heavily involved, did a lot of research, fired two of the top cybersecurity people at the company, and he made numerous public statements and then took measures to properly report it to the states. And then the states did not like it because they thought that Uber was covering it up, which I tend to agree. And what I always say about cybersecurity is pretty much everyone knows that a cyber incident can happen to anyone. Like we talked about it happening at Microsoft earlier, $3 or $4 trillion company. Where things go wrong is when you don't have proof that you did due diligence, you took steps to prevent it, and then what's the worst thing you can do is lie about it, right? So if I'm a regulator, I'd probably do what these regulators did and like 10x that fine, right? So they got a $148 million fine spread out across the different states. About half of that state in California. I guess they were the primary plaintiff. But if they would have just handled this properly, even though they're a big company, it probably would have been maybe 10 to 20% of that. So lesson learned, do the due diligence, and just don't lie about things when they happen. And also, you got to use the two-factor authentication, right? Like this is something I help really small businesses with, but we see time after time that even big businesses often don't use it, and that's even on sophisticated attacks, that's often the initial way that a threat actor got in, right? Because before you can do crazy stuff within the system, you got to get in, and weak passwords and lack of strong 2FA are the common ways that we see that happening. So what do you think about that, Karina?
So again, access controls, right? So know where that data is going, who's accessing it, and again, vendor management. Now, I was, I'm not going to actually associate anyone directly to this conversation. However, companies like Uber have expressed incredible frustration with the lack of liabilities between companies as you go down the vendor management path downstream. So you as a company can use a vendor, and some of these breaches did include this scenario for this company specifically. Actually, they use a vendor and they have a contract with that vendor.
Yep.
Then that vendor goes and sends your data to their vendor. Now there's a brick wall that's really in between your first line vendor and their vendor, because now you have no access to get to that downstream vendor and actually have any say in what that vendor is doing. So this assumption is now, well, this wasn't my fault. This wasn't my vendor's fault. Our relationship is good. Right. And now there's this big black void for downstream passing of data that technically, because you can't really control, you're not kind of liable. Now, you can be a company, MUFG, shout out to MUFG. If anyone's on the phone for MUFG, they did make a very strong position in their vendor management program that says, dear first line vendor of mine, if you're not going to disclose to me where you send my data, I ain't doing business with you. You can choose to do that. I implore everyone to do that, because that will provide a whole bunch of visibility into how our data is handled downstream.
Well, right along those lines, one thing that helps a lot in this regard is flow down agreements, right? So when you do your agreement, the agreement says that you agree if you hand our data to anyone else, they're going to protect it the same exact way that you are. It's not going to be an excuse if you hand it off to someone else and blame them. You're still liable.
Oh, I'm sorry. That's allergies.
Bless you. So that way, you're getting both consistent cybersecurity happening no matter where the data is, and consistent privacy practices the way it is, right? Because we got to think about cybersecurity, but also consumer privacy. Because we can't just say we're not going to sell the data, and then our service provider sells it, and we're like, oh, well, we didn't know they're going to do that. I mean, there's some companies that might put a disclaimer in the agreement, but you got to know what you're looking at and call it out. Don't just let that contract slide by because you want to just let them get to work and help you. This stuff is really serious, and you got to make sure that the data is protected and those consumers are being treated properly.
So what I see a lot is one of these, right? So the IT person hands the legal person the contract. Okay, check for everything, assuming that legal person is going to do all of the due diligence. Well, the legal person receives the contract from the IT person going, they must have done all of the technical due diligence. And there's this big fat gap that's created between this workflow as this document is passed. Okay, I want to get to the next one because this is like the epitome of the failed vendor management controls. This is an oldie but goodie. Present, share screen. This is a little more complex. Here we go. Okay. So this is an old story, folks. I love this story because and I do remind myself to read it. It's a few years old, but here's what happened in a nutshell. Company A, in this case, Morgan Stanley, hires a vendor, right? Well, we're just talking about, right? Company B, their first line vendor. And that first line vendor's job is to refresh and update workstations and public information. And they went and dumped a bunch of laptops into a dumpster. Didn't wipe them. And just did this dump in a big dumpster, corporate building in the back somewhere, the bottom floor. Just did this big old dump, and of course someone sniffs this out and collects all of this data. Now, they did agree to a $60 million settlement, and again, there are vendor. So this is, again, vendor management all over the place, right? So Morgan Stanley may have had the best intent in the world, but hired a vendor and they didn't go through the details, right? With how is this going to be handled? So a few things here. Data classification. If you say all of your data is important, none of it is important. That's a Mike Andrews quote, actually, that I love to use. So basically, you have to know where your golden egg information is. Do not encrypt publicly available information. Why? Why are you creating a bigger data set than you need to for your company? Data purposefulness, data minimization. Frameworks like HITRUST already actually contain that language. Align it to your business. That will now tell you the different types of retention and destruction requirements. If you have really important data, keep it longer, back it up more frequently, and have very stringent destruction practices for it, right? If you have publicly available data, don't keep it more than a few weeks. Get rid of it. Get rid of it. You're minimizing your data set, you're minimizing your cost. You don't have to back it up frequently. It's publicly available once a week versus maybe every 10 minutes for the important stuff. Get rid of this stuff quickly. Don't hold on to it because it has no purpose for your business. Make that happen. Actually figure out a way to do data destruction. Now, when that vendor comes along, you can say, oh, okay, dear vendor, you're handling my really important stuff. These are the practices of mine that I want you to follow. Here's my backup requirement. Here's my retention requirement. Here's my destruction requirement. Make sure that those are actually very well specified and measured, that they're being executed at the vendors. Okay, Mike, what do you think on that one?
It's really surprising a company like Morgan Stanley would have that happen because they're one of the biggest financial companies in the world. I actually work with them, have an account with one of their subsidiaries. Really big company. And to have something this simple happens, it makes me wonder if the process were messed up or if just the crew on site just said, oh, we're not following a checklist or what. But you would think something as simple as a checklist would solve it in this case, you know, like step one, pick up items. Step two,
Right.
bring them to authorized location, not dumpster. And then
Now, what these companies have are checklists of thousands and thousands and thousands of rows. They have that, but somewhere in this vendor management gap, that's failing. So open up those contracts and open up those terms of services. We're running out of time. We're only through a few, and then we're halfway through the hour. So you're next. Let's go. I love this.
Okay. Next one here. Let's go. Whoa, this one's controversial.
Yeah.
You ready for it, guys? Maybe you've
We
seen
preached again recently. You know that, right?
Oh, I didn't know that, but I'm not worried about it because I am not on the platform. So very thankful for that. Very, very thankful. So this was actually made into a multi-part Netflix series. I think it came out like a year or two ago. We watched it. It was very interesting. So this is a controversial company to where people that are married are encouraged to sign up to cheat on their spouse. Then other people are signed up to cheat with those people. So it was largely men looking for someone else, some women. And then there was a lot of crazy stuff happen. But in 2015, there was a threat actor group called the Impact Team, which I love that name. If you're going to be a threat actor group, it's really cool. It could be a hip hop group. They did not like this concept because they thought people should not be doing this. So initially, it seemed like they were somewhat of a moral hacking group, which sometimes happens. You know, there's lots of different types. So they got into the system. And in this case, it's not really clear. Some people say it was a phishing incident. Others places say that there was a malicious insider that the threat actor group got access to that was an employee, perhaps a contractor. I'm not really sure exactly in this case, but the threat actor group was able to get 25 gigabytes of data of the users on the platform that include their names, addresses, other personal information. And then some sources even said that naughty photos were included. So this is an absolute disaster that can ruin a lot of lives easily. There were some celebrities on there. There were multiple suicides in response to this. So I brought this one up to show that at times we might look at cybersecurity like it's just computer stuff, hands on keyboard, no one gets hurt. But people can die from this sort of
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah.
Lives can be ruined. I mean, these people shouldn't be on this platform to begin with, but they still don't deserve to die because this stuff goes public, right? And there was a lot of shady stuff involved here. So the company, because they knew that a lot of people would want to scrub their data, they offered a special feature for $19 to where if you paid that $19, they would really delete the data. And but it turns out they weren't. So they brought in a couple $1 million just from that feature alone, and then it turns out all that data was involved in the data breach anyway. So long story short, they got sued. They had to settle for $11.2 million, which I would argue is really small. The amount probably should have been closer to the amount that would put them out of business for what they did. I mean, it's just absolute disastrous, ruined lives. We're dead because of this. But really, you got to take cybersecurity and privacy seriously, especially if you're on a sensitive platform. So we often think of sensitive like our financial records, but I'm sure in this case, the people involved with Ashley Madison probably thought this was pretty sensitive. So by them not properly protecting the data the way they would, it was definitely kind of like a loss of trust to the people they were working with, and it just shouldn't happen. So what do you think about this, Karina?
I think that it's another vendor management fail, right? So vendor management and access control failed because it was so elusive, the versions that we heard about this. And then the second attack and the second compromise, even after that offering of super secrecy, extra money for super secrecy, it doesn't happen, and it didn't happen with this one. So very, very sad.
Oh, yeah.
Very, very sad on that one.
I agree. It's unfortunate. What do you got next?
I am getting ready for this one. This is a very, very important. Please, please, if you're going to really pay attention to anything, please pay attention to this one. There is a software system called PowerSchool. PowerSchool is used in most schools across America. They just announced or disclosed that they have lost more than 60 million users' information. This is private information about our kids. This is their names, their addresses, the meds that they're on, whether they got a scuff during recess, any behavioral issues, any recommendations for and doctor's orders information, grades. In addition, this goes all the way back to, from what I heard, some people are hitting it going back to the 80s.
Wow.
The 80s. So most people on this phone are affected by this because they know, the proverbial they know, how well you did in algebra for school, right? So isn't that something? Again, compromised credentials, access control fail, yet another one, basic control. Compromised credentials, which means you haven't trained your folks that say, don't use the same password. You're thinking you're training them once a year and that's good enough. It isn't. I mean, this question code, remember, Mike, we were talking about it during the holidays when you get the package that has a little trinket.
Yep.
Oh, hey, if you want to find out which friend of yours sent you this little trinket addressed to you at your home address, click here, scan this QR code, right? So if you did training a year ago, last January, and you haven't done it for a year, that question code would never be on there because it needs to stay refreshed, right? Password refreshes, policies on your SSOs, on identifying all of the entry points into your infrastructure. How many applications do you important? So, there are students who are actually filing suit against their schools that are getting this data from PowerSchool. because for some reason parents are numb to it. I don't know why parents don't care so much about their kids' identity being hacked. Two things, please. Try to limit the pictures and videos you put of your kids online. You are creating a digital signature for them. They have not opted into, they have not had any decision in. Please don't create that signature for them. Let them do that when they hit 18, number one. Number two, the more times you post, the easier it is to piece together an identity. Deep fake, hacking opportunities, a threat, right? In a threat, identity threat theft could be happening. Clean social security numbers are great on being facetious to establish credit history against, because when your kid turns 16, 17 and starts applying for those student loans, the worst thing you want is to find out that they owe somebody money that they're delinquent on, and now school starting has been delayed several years. Lock down your kids' social security numbers, just like you should have already locked down yours. Mike, anything to add?
Yeah, I would think that people would definitely consider the personal information of their children to be sensitive information. Companies should realize that. There's even some stuff in place for that. I don't work with those schools, but I believe FERPA covers this to some degree. But yeah, it's definitely got to. There's a lot of ramifications for this. You know, whether it's identity theft or just targeting the kids on the internet. And I know my kids are too young to go online, but if you think I protect my clients intensely, those kids are going to have it way more. I'm going to treat those kids' cybersecurity and privacy like it's Fort Knox when they start using that. So yeah, that's unbelievable and unfortunate. I hope nothing came of it to any individual children as a result of this.
Mike.
Can you hear me?
Now we can. Now we can.
Oh, how long did it cut out for a while?
Just for a few seconds.
Okay. Yeah. No, I was just saying. I hope no individual children were especially face physical harm as a result of this.
Yeah.
And hopefully no financial or even embarrassment. You know, because a lot of kids get targeted online, get tricked into doing something stupid, and then someone just puts them in harm's way, embarrasses them, and kids have killed themselves over this stuff. It's very seriously for parents. It's very seriously for platforms and institutions that are safeguarding the data of children. It's very important. So,
correct. All right. What's your next one?
Let's see what we got there. Okay. If you're on the East Coast and you're an automotive user, this one might ring bells to you. If you remember the Colonial Pipeline cyber attack of 2021 that impacted systems along the East Coast for this company, Colonial Pipeline Company is actually their name. So this one was actually done by a group called the DarkSide Group. And what they did was they targeted a legacy VPN system, and they were able to get on that way. So when interviewed about all this, the CEO says that the password in place on there was very strong. So there's a lot of problems here. You're probably already picking up on some of them. So remember I said legacy VPN system. So this wasn't even the main one they were using. This was some one that they used to use that was still online, and it clearly wasn't being monitored because the threat actors were in there for a good while. And then the CEO also admitted that they didn't have a good plan in place to deal with ransomware, even though they did have an incident response plan to help them clean up.
Yeah.
Right. So what happened is their billing and accounting systems were hit first by the ransomware. The threat actors were trying to move laterally to gain more access. Of course, what they probably ultimately wanted was to get access to those oil systems, the one that controlled the flow, but they weren't in there yet. But this takes us to an interesting decision point because the company decided to shut down those systems proactively anyway, possibly out of an abundance of caution, as lots of companies say, or maybe they knew it was just a matter of time before the threat actors were able to get into there. So that's where the real world impact comes into play, right? Because even though the billing and accounting systems were messed up, that's mainly affecting the company's pocketbook. But when the oil pumps were shut down, oil prices soared. This hurt everyday people to a large degree, shut down some gas stations. Some people couldn't even get gas for a number of days. That lasted around 6 days in total, right? So the company decided to pay a $4.4 million crypto ransom to the threat actor. And then that helped them get the systems back online. Another interesting thing is that the government was actually able to help them recover about half of the cryptocurrency by getting into the threat actor's system and compromising their crypto wallets. That's pretty interesting for the government. Some people thought they had a backdoor. Turns out I'm pretty sure they did not. That's another story. But all in all, Colonial Pipeline lost an estimated $15 million as a result of this. We're also seeing a lot of new government involvement in relation to the operation of critical infrastructure like pipelines, telecom companies, because we can't have this, right? This doesn't just impact the company. This impacts the country's stability. This impacts families, businesses, everybody. And in the end, this might be a good thing because the government's going to make sure cybersecurity happens better. And that's just more likely to make sure companies do take it seriously. So what do you think about this one, Karina?
I think that the very beginning of that headline said 1Password. We're back to access control, folks, right? Make sure that password is not shared. Make sure that your policy is enforcing. There's an enforcement capability. People log stuff all the time. Who looks at the logs? Do you have a person actually assigned that says, this looks weird. This is a strange pattern. This person shouldn't be accessing this over here. Where is this originating and coming from? All of the tools are available for us. We're overwhelmed with GRC and compliance to the point where we're missing these basics. Go look at your access control policy. Go look at your password policy and understand the enforcement in your own company. So I want to share one now that you're talking about the government. I'm going to kind of line this one up.
Oh, just one final comment about that. So remember I said the CEO mentioned that it was a strong password. So some people might be wondering, well, how'd they get it then? It turns out it was on the dark web because it was part of another breach. That shows you it's great if you have a strong password, but don't reuse it. It's got to be unique. So that way, if it wasn't another breach, the other places you use it don't get impacted. So I just want
even shared logins, right? People are trying to save money and taking one password and one credential and sharing it around. Don't. Okay, so we're going to talk about the government, folks. Even they can get hacked as well. The U.S. Treasury did get hacked. FBI is currently investigating it. What's the highlighted 2 words? Gained access. Again, it's probably a shared password. If it's potentially reused passwords. Somebody said that they have to provide technical support for the U.S. government. Same situation once more, right? We have an issue of, we have a third-party vendor involved in this, right? So that third party is providing a notice, and it's basically saying that somebody was saying that they could go ahead and provide technical support, and someone went ahead and shared the access. Again, so many basic fundamentals and user security awareness training, not sharing passwords, not reusing passwords, not using the same passwords across different platforms, watching the entry point, protecting perimeter security, VPNs, right? It's better to knock people off and piss them off, people, right? If there's some suspected access that's coming into your environment, reject it first. That should be your first impulse. Reject the entry and then go talk to that person. Hey, was that really you? Oh, you're on vacation. You're working this week from a different state. Okay, because your IP looks different. right? Do the rejection first and piss people off. It doesn't matter that they're pissed off. They're going to come back in anyway and get on the phone with you and explain to you why they're dialing in from a different area than usual. Have all of those events be logged. Go ahead, Mike. What are your thoughts on this one?
I think some people might be saying, oh, that's another one related to access management. Well, if you think about it, for a threat actor to do something, whether it's online, like a cyber incident, or even if you're robbing a Home Depot, before you can do something in the system, or in the case of Home Depot, a store, you got to get in, right? So, yeah. So you got a lot of these that we bring up, and in general, are going to be related to access management because they have to get in one way or another. And it's often, even in sophisticated attacks, even attacks on government, it's often something simple like the access management, like, lack of 2FA, weak passwords, something like that. So it can't be a surprise when access controls are brought up when explaining a situation like one of these.
So one more thing I want to bring up real quickly before you bring up your next one is I know that I strongly recommend, and I know that Mike also has a relationship with Yastis. They have a really fantastic product that makes it very, very simple to see who's in which folder, who has what level of access to what, including contractors. So many times there are SOC 2s and audit findings that contractors bypass our standardized HR onboarding and offboarding processes because you have that rogue that rogue department manager that hires in a contractor, creates access, but then when the money's gone or the project's over, they forget to deactivate that access. And so actually I have seen demos with Yastis basically including everybody that has access to particular folders and full integration with all kinds of different SSOs and online platforms. So highly recommend them. I just got to shout that out. Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, very true. They're one of my favorite vendors to recommend. One, because they're a good team, but also it's a great product. And I've been part of some large-scale re-verifications of account, like groups and roles and privileges. And if you do it manually, it's very, very tedious because you have to contact a lot of people, and their software can save you like a lot of time, maybe 50 to 80% of the time. And their pricing is pretty good too. So
yeah,
something to keep in mind. So now we're at my final one, and then Karina is going to wrap it up after with her final of the 5.
Mm-hmm.
So some of you can probably guess where I'm going with this, because I'm a Las Vegas resident who works in cybersecurity. So as you can imagine, I've probably talked about the MGM and Caesars cyber incident many, many times. This actually happened in 2023. Coincidentally, at the time, that month, I did like 2 or 3 presentations in front of an audience. And at the end, when it came time for questions, there was not one question about anything that I spoke about. And they had only questions about this cyber incident, which is okay, because it's really interesting. It was local, it was timely. And ultimately, I think it helped bring a lot of attention to cybersecurity. I know it did, in fact. So this attack was initiated by a well-known ransomware group called Alpha V Black Cat. And they have some affiliates involved too. And they're known to be really good at social engineering attacks. So they got MGM and Caesars in a similar way, for the most part. It was social engineering. In the case of MGM, they researched one of their high-level administrators who they figured had a lot of access, probably on LinkedIn, maybe some other public sources. And they reached out to a help desk or the like and pretended to be them, so that way they can regain access to systems, is what they said. And then the MGM help desk gave them access to get on the systems. And then they tried to get lateral movement, because that's what threat actors always do. You don't want access just to the one system you're on. You want to get as much as possible, right? The more, the better. So a similar thing happened on the Caesars end, but what's a little different with them, it was not an employee who got tricked. This was all handled when the threat actor reached out to a third party that was doing admin work on behalf of Caesars. So it goes back to being a vendor management risk, like a lot of them that we talked about. So this part gets really interesting for me because Caesars handled it very differently than MGM. They decided pretty quickly to pay a $15 million ransom to get their systems back online, or maybe not even disrupted in the first place. Although the threat actors did still have access to their data, which included millions of records, whereas MGM decided to play hardball and they said, we're not going to pay that ransom request. We'll try to figure it out. And unfortunately, over the course of about a month, it ended up costing them $100 million in lost revenue, as reported in multiple sources. And they saw a downtime disruption across their reservation system, their reward system, some of their accounting systems. It was even reported that threat actors were trying to get into their gaming systems so that way they can rig it up so someone can go win jackpots. Good news is that was apparently not successful. So another issue that I see here instantly, there must not have been really good segmentation in place, because if the same credentials can get you into all these different systems, the credentials were obviously very broadly, very high level privileges. Not sure if two-factor authentication was in place along with that. I don't see how it's possible. I mean, there's a chance if maybe they tricked the help desk into sending out a backup code for the 2FA, for example. But something to keep in mind in relation to this one is ransomware is probably the biggest nightmares of a lot of companies. So it's important to think about this beforehand to know what you will do if you or your company is impacted by ransomware. You might say, oh, well, if they have our sensitive data, we can pay up to $10,000, but anything after that, and we're just going to have to gamble at that point because we don't have much more money than that, or we don't trust them anyway, so we're not going to send them too much money. But just have a plan in place for if you get hit by ransomware. You also want to have good administrative processes in place for things like password resets, like we saw in this case, because if you think about it, if you're only authenticating the user publicly available information for the most part, that's very risky. You got to have some method that no one else can access, right? Maybe it's a one-time code or something like that, a backup to a cell phone, whatever the case may be. Something that's not publicly available, so you have a much lower chance of this happening. Of course, you want to have two-factor authentication. That way, even if a password reset email goes out, for example, you're probably still safe because they don't have the second factor, which might be an app on their smartphone or a standalone hardware device that can be used for two-factor authentication purposes. So, Karina, what do you think of this one?
I'm gonna say it again, right? Access controls and third-party risk management. Again, same kind of situation is not carefully watching who's coming into your environment and what controls they're using. So it's I think it's kind of the same thing over and over again. But I'm being almost intentional about calling this out because we all forget.
Yeah.
We all think that some agency came in or some firm came in and wrote all of those documents that are now sitting on a shelf collecting dust, not appropriated to your actual environment, but they're done. The check boxes are done. We paid a lot of money to that firm to come in and write us all those documents that are totally useless now, that we're not actually applying to our true operations. And somewhere in our head, we're assuming, well, this basic has got to be done. The access controls have to be done. I'm sure the vendor management group over there, they work really hard. Every time I write them an email, they're like, oh, I can't go to lunch because I'm so busy. So they're doing stuff. They must be really busy.
Yep.
Right. And so we are forgetting this chain link command that is existing in our environment of all of these players. We've created these vendor agreements and we're assuming that the basics are in place, and they're just not. They're just not. So I'm going to go on to the last one. I'm going to try to make this one nice and fast. This is more of a high five to people. This is a big high five to the state of Texas, who had their consumer privacy law actually begin to be enactable July 1. We do have other states across the U.S. that do have consumer privacy states. I will list them out. California, Delaware, New Jersey, Colorado, Nebraska, Iowa, Connecticut, Montana, Virginia, New Hampshire, Oregon, Texas, and Utah. These states allow their residents to enact their privacy rights. There are other states who have also passed a consumer privacy law. However, it is not yet enactable. These may be referred to as DSARs, originated by GDPR. The reason is those requests were called data subject access rights. And we in the US actually use the language consumer privacy in our laws. There are over 120 countries globally who have consumer privacy laws. If you have any data about consumers, transactional data, any kind of data, please make sure you identify that as part of your data classification policy. Remember, where's my most important data versus not important data? Tag that consumer data, because if that consumer sends you a request and says, I want you to get rid of my data, you want to figure out a way to verify that request real quickly. Usually it's let's say I went and got some coffee and I have a membership number. Hey, delete my data. Okay, throw up 4 radio buttons. One of the options is a correct transaction. Karina bought coffee in Westlake Village on Tuesday, California, or she bought it in Iowa, or she bought it in Tennessee, or she bought it in Boston. Pick one, Karina. Oh, I know I was in Westlake Village, so delete all of my information. You have to be able to show fulfillment of these requests. You have to be able to allow people to opt out of marketing. These are laws. These are not frameworks. These are actual laws that says if you are a company that handles consumer data, you have to put the right protections around it and treat it with respect. And if somebody says, I want you to get rid of my data, you have to do it. What did the state of Texas do? And hats off to them. I know California has had some legal enactments against companies, but these guys, man, went down deep and discovered that your location is being transmitted, your telemetry, your braking, your speeding every 3 seconds for 45 million Americans. As a result of this call, go find out. If you have Allstate, go contact their website and opt out of their data sharing principles. It's usually at the very bottom. Websites try to make sure that nobody ever sees them. It's all the way at the very end. And they make sure you opt out of selling that information. All right, go ahead. Go Mike, quick on this one, because I got 2 more things to say.
Yeah. So just with privacy in general, right? It's important to know which privacy applies to your company, right? So say a company has customers in Europe and then 6 states, and those states have consumer privacy law. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Sorry, I thought it cut out for a second. It just basically, you got to know what applies to your company based on where you operate, and then check for exclusions, right? Because just because you have a few clients in a state, you may not have to comply, because some states have an exemption if you're too small or if you don't have that much revenue. Just make sure it applies to you, and then build your privacy program in a way where you can kind of handle all of it at once. That way you're not handling it like it's 15 different projects.
Okay. So thank you for that. Real quick, February 3rd, my article will be on the cover of Cyber Defense Magazine. I implore everyone to go ahead and read about it. It's some DRBCP fails, again, some of the basics that we're overseeing. I want to thank that entire team. That was not my intent of this article, but they went ahead and they actually promoted it to their cover. The other thing, very quickly, please make sure you have an AI policy, because your people are using AI, and unless you give them instructions on what they can and cannot put inside that AI, and you don't have a data classification policy that backs up the type of data you have, they may be putting all kinds of information in about creatives, customers, finances, all kinds of information.
Good point. Great info, Karina, and that was a good choice of them to select you to do that in early February. So congratulations.
Thank you.
Since we're running out of time, I just want to quickly look at the questions. I see one here. What is the best way you recommend for locking down Social Security numbers? Is there a cost for parents to lock down their children's SSNs? Well, you can always freeze it with the credit bureaus directly, and you can sign up for varying levels of credit monitoring. Something like SafeLock, or some credit cards even have provisions in place, or free credit reports. You can also pull a free credit report from each of the bureaus. I believe it's still one per bureau per year.
Yeah.
And you can do that for your children as well. So you can just set a calendar reminder to go pull it for each of your kids and yourself, and anyone in your family. So that way you can stay on top of it and react quickly. Fortunately, if someone takes advantage of like your credit cards, you're often not liable. So I recommend using a credit card rather than a debit card, since debit cards often don't have those same protections. See if there's any more questions here. Will this recording be made available for later viewing? Yes, you can watch this at any time at the same link. You can also check out our prior one from December, how to start your cyber GRC program today. I can put that link in the comments, so you can check it out anytime or share it. Let's see what else we have here.
I think we're good.
Lots of comments, but yeah, no, I don't see any more questions. So I want to thank you, Karina, for collaborating with me. It's always a pleasure. I want to thank the audience for joining us. I hope you found some of this informative and interesting, and maybe applicable to your organization. And if any practitioners on the line would like to join us for some content in the future, please reach out, whether you're a practitioner like us or perhaps at a software company. Content's always a good way to collaborate, get your name out there, whatever you need to do. And hope you have a great rest of your day. Karina, any closing words from you?
I just want to thank everyone for joining, and definitely just hopefully it's some messages that they can bring back to their companies, to their businesses, and implement.
All right. Thank you, Karina. Thank you all, and have a great day.
Have a great day. Bye.